Kia ora te whānau. My name is Dean Ford. I am the General Manager of Economic Development and Transitions at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. My team and I have been down here quite a lot over the past couple of years through the Southland Just Transition work. I'm going to tell you a bit about that and give you an update soon. But before I do that, I just want to introduce my Chief Executive, Karen Tremaine. She's going to make some introductory remarks about the role of MBIE in all of this energy and innovation work. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ranganui kei ronga, ko Papatūānuku kei raro, ko ngā tangata kei Wainanui, tihei Māori ora. Ko Carolyn Tremaine, toko ingoa, ko Oti Tuma whakarai ke hikina whakatūtoki. I'm Carolyn Tremaine and I'm the Chief Executive, as Dean introduced me, for MBIE, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. It's fantastic to see so many people here at this wānanga. I think it's extraordinary that we can have this kind of discussion in Invercargill where these issues are very present, and it was great to hear the Minister earlier as well. I really enjoyed a number of the earlier sessions, Aku, Rangatira Te Tapani and Michael Skerritt. It's wonderful to hear how you translate a complex piece of work into, if not this opportunity, what is your contribution to the discussion. So I really appreciate those kinds of comments to set us in our discussions for this session. And also, I have to say, Dr. Stevens, that I've never really thought of myself as the kelp before, but it's got a certain attraction to a visual around it. And I think as MBIE, we probably try to be the enablers of economic development rather than the constraining on the innovation of the public and private sector. It's really timely to have this discussion today. Energy transition lies at the heart of New Zealand's economic future, climate change mitigation and regional development. And the government has a critical role to play in ensuring that energy transition takes place in a sustainable and economically viable way. I'm going to cover a few areas around MBIE. I'm not going to try to cover the breadth of MBIE. It's one of those large parts of government where there are many tentacles. And a colleague of mine from Ngāti Kahungunu had said to me that MBIE is a little bit like the Swiss Army knife of government. And I think it's not a bad analogy. We have many different areas in which we interact in the economy. When we look at the session today, I'll talk a little bit about energy, I'll talk a little bit about the ED portfolio, the work of our investment arm, Kanoa, also a little bit on partnering with Māori and also the Regional Skills Leadership Group. And I think some of the comments of the questions that we just heard around the labour and skills and where's the pathway for our rangatahi in the future is really important. So Dean will then cover a little bit more specifically about the work he and his team have been doing here in Murihiku in Southland, and making sure that we have an element of practical discussion as well. So energy is probably one of the really dominating parts of the MBIE work program at the moment. The Emissions Reduction Plan 1 gave MBIE something in the order of 130 activities to deliver, and the majority of those fall within the energy portfolio. And I'll just acknowledge my team from MBIE here. I won't make you all stand up, but Sharon Corbett, who's just sitting down here, is probably one of the key energy folk if you have questions in that area. And so MBIE and the energy team is leading the system for developing new strategy and policy to make sure that our policy settings for the energy markets in the future are fit for purpose. And this includes the government's energy strategies that set the direction and priorities for the New Zealand energy sector.
Recording stopped.
it's probably good. Didn't say anything now. So just moving on. Relevant, I guess, for today's meeting as part of the energy strategy, MBIE is developing a roadmap for hydrogen for New Zealand, and that roadmap will outline the pathway for a hydrogen industry in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that supports social, economic and environmental well-being. MBIE is currently undertaking targeted engagement on our initial approach to the roadmap, including key objectives and priorities. Our science and innovation work also plays a crucial role in transitioning to a low-carbon economy, and you heard some of the technologies that are already being used around the world in our previous speaker, Jason's presentation. But in essence, the transition to net zero emissions means that we have to find new sustainable ways to solve the problems of the world that we currently solve with fossil fuels. The adoption of low-carbon technologies will be crucial, but non-technical innovations such as changes in practices or behaviours will also be required. At MBIE, the Science and Innovation and International Branch provides advice and leads initiatives related to the leadership and development of New Zealand's science and innovation system. MBIE's invested more than $40 million in hydrogen-related research and science and innovation projects. New Zealand also has 2 international arrangements with Japan and Singapore to cooperate on hydrogen research and development. I'd just like to touch on Kānoa, which is our Regional Economic Development and Investment Unit. And this is where we see examples of MBIE working with the private sector to develop new initiatives within different regions of New Zealand. And it's more of a partnership program that's carried out in Kānoa that supports business and industry in the regions. Through funds managed by Kānoa, we explore and invest in opportunities to revitalise regional economies and communities. Working to enhance economic development brings meaningful employment opportunities and positive social outcomes in regional New Zealand. We work across government and with industry, communities, iwi and local government to improve the well-being of New Zealanders living in our regions. And we do this by delivering government funding to nurture each region's economy so they can grow and develop to reach their full potential. We continue to support regional business through a $200 million regional strategic partnership fund, including specific funding of $40 million to unlock the potential of whenua Māori. A number of renewable energy projects throughout New Zealand have been funded by Kānoa. Effective and enduring relationships with iwi and Māori groups and the Crown are critical to enable economic and social development, both for Māori and the wider population. Success is built on partnership, and we will continue to partner with Māori to find sustainable solutions to long-standing systemic and cross-cutting issues facing Māori and the country as a whole. MBIE also has strong partnership in the regions through 15 regional skills leadership groups. These are independent advisory groups that are locally based and regionally led. They identify and support better ways to meet future skills and workforce needs in their regions, both now and in the future, and advise on actions to address these. The Southland Murihiku Regional Skills Leadership Group released its first regional workforce plan on the 14th of July 2022. And the plan sets out the aspirations, priorities and actions for current and future workforce skills development in the region. And the plan will identify and support better ways of meeting future skills and workforce needs for Southland. The regional workforce and skills development priorities identified in the plans will also help inform the education and employment and training agencies across government. So these include the Ministry of Social Development. I'd just like to acknowledge my colleague, the CE of the Ministry of Social Development, Debbie Power, who's here today. But it also will include the Tertiary Education Commission, the Ministry of Education, Ministry for Women and TPK. All these agencies together help to join to plan with government and regions plans for the region's workforce plans and regional skills leadership groups. In closing, I'd just like to reiterate that MBIE has a clear role in leading the government's work and responsibilities of transitioning New Zealand to a low-carbon economy through both energy policy, innovation and economic partnerships with regions and Māori. In Southland, MBIE has invested in a just transition process, which Dean and his team will lead, and I'll hand over to Dean now to talk a little bit more specifically about the Just Transitions process, including the Budget 23 initiative announced by Minister Woods and the regional hydrogen transition. Tēnā koutou, ngā mihi nui.
Nā opoko te mirihuku, e Tatapiti, e Michael, e Terry. I'm not sure he went. Tēnā koutou. E rangatira o te Invercargill City Council, tēnā koe Nobby, and kia ora te whānau. It's great to be here. About a week ago, I said to the Minister that Terry and Mike had asked me to speak at this event, and I said, what would you like me to say? And she said, can you just be boring, Dean? Don't say anything that I haven't already said, no surprises, keep it nice and tidy. So if you have all read the Just Transitions website from cover to cover, listened to every speech that Minister Woods has given, and read the budget documents thoroughly last week, none of this is going to be new, so I apologise for that. However, if this is things that you haven't done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a bit about the Just Transitions work, what kind of the main components were or what we're trying to achieve, who are some of the people involved, and just give a bit of detail over some of the announcement that the Minister has given this morning. And then I'm going to somehow have a go at explaining what this hydrogen rebate is. And it will be a little bit complicated, but by the end of it, anyone who is an expert in energy markets will be deeply disappointed, but the rest of you hopefully will have a pretty good idea what's going to happen next. So that's the plan. If anything I say, I don't know, you miss it or you're playing on your phone or what have you, that website there, sorry, I can't quite see it, the Southland Just Transition.nz has a lot of this material, so you can always have a look later on. Anyway, let me get started. So, have I got the slides in? Yes, I have. Look at that. Okay, so 2 years ago, after Tā Tipani's, I guess, call to arms that with the risk of the smelter closing, we wanted to make sure that Southland had a plan, and this wasn't going to be a very brutal transition for the region. My team and I were sent down and we met with some of the local government and Terry and some of the iwi leaders and said we wanted to come together to try and identify a just transition. And over time, business, unions and community groups came in and we tried to identify what is the goal that we could all share and get behind. And we came up with these words, and it's one of those kind of sentences that seems pretty obvious, but once you pick into it, it's really helped kind of bring the group together. So the goal is how to help Southland build its economic, environmental and social resilience through and beyond this risk of closure. So it didn't say we're here to get rid of the smelter. It didn't say we're going to be trying to get it to stay no matter what. And it didn't say we're going to be just worried about something in the long term or just something right now like a crisis response. It was all about how you build up resilience no matter what happens, both in the near term and in the long term. And we kind of started to work together to figure out, well, what could we do to try and help this? And we came up with this three-pronged economic development plan. And economic development in a lot of instances is pretty simple. You just figure out what you want to do and figure out how you get there. And so the first prong was what new industries could we actually support in Southland? And a lot of this stuff has been well advanced for years. It was just about what could we do to try and move things forward a bit. And there were three broad areas we really tried to lean into. The first one was new energy, led by the Mirihiku Regeneration Collective, and Mike and Terry have been instrumental in this work. not least of which is getting this wānanga together today. The Thriving South, I'm not sure if Richard Kite's here today or not, but some of the work he was doing, including with the Hukanui Runaka, to try and think about some of the different uses for land in Southland. We've been advancing that work. And then Amy, who, it's really hard to find people in this room, Amy's been doing her work on the aquaculture initiatives. And that's all been moving forward quite well. But we always knew that even if we are able to achieve some of this industry transformation, you start to build new things, you've then got to help businesses and people adapt. So there's a lot of businesses in Southland that have sold pretty much the same product to pretty much the same customer for a very, very long time. And if you've got this thing called hydrogen or this thing called aquaculture that want and demand totally different products, how do you go about doing that? So Neil and Cherie and the team at the Chamber of Commerce were working on, well, how would you help businesses transition to this new approach? And there's been some work going on there. And then Ivan and Anna up the back have been asking the question, and what about workers? How do you go from someone that maybe has been doing a job for a very long time to adapt a new skill? My father, I'm a railways kid, and my dad went into the railways as an 18-year-old fully qualified mechanic, and he'd come out of the railways as a mechanic with the skills completely obsolete. All he'd done had fixed Bedford buses for 20 years. And I often thought, gee, if there was someone like Anna at that time that just could have said, oh, here's this 6-month course to modernise your skills, Dad would probably still be a mechanic. And it's those sorts of transitions we wanted to help people with. And then the question was, and what do you do beyond that? How do you do this long-term planning? So there's some work that Grace South's leading. I think there's a launch of the long-term plan, so the results of this work later in June, so if you're interested in that work. And then there was a question about how do you help the community get ready for this. So the Regional Public Service lead, Steph Voigt, who, good on you, Steph, has been picking up that work. So there's been a lot of things already going on. And then this morning, the Minister said, actually, I want to announce further support for that. So in that speech, there were probably 4 main things that she really announced. The first one was this regional hydrogen transition initiative that I'm going to have a go at explaining. The second one was about leaning in even further into the aquaculture work. And then I guess the third one, really a group, was something that the Chamber of Commerce has been investigating, which is this engineering cluster, which is how do you help all these businesses that currently are very much tied to the smelter, how do you help them move to a world where they can do the smelter and something else? And then more generally, the startup community being supported by COIN. Just so people know what's going to happen next is there are a fair few MBIE officials that turned up today, and the reason for that is they are actually engaging with these groups to sort out exactly what these funding agreements will be. We don't like to just decide from Wellington, you'll have this much money to do this exact thing. We want to come and talk to the people and say, we'd like to achieve this sort of stuff with this sort of money, what is it you'd like to do? And so we're down here to try and iron out those contracts, and hopefully they're signed reasonably quickly and we can get on with the work. But you never know, you might want to ask Amy about this tomorrow when she speaks about aquaculture, or Neil, when you're talking tomorrow, you can talk about some of this work as well, just to set you up, buddy. But what I want to do now is talk about this, this regional hydrogen transition tool. So what the Minister talked about was she wanted this to bridge the gap between hydrogen and fossil fuel alternates. I'm going to give quite a stylistic explanation of this. And it tends to be the case that the most commercial use at the moment is as a fertiliser, but not many people buy fertiliser. So I'm going to explain it about the transport fuel. It doesn't mean that it will end up being what actually happens, but most of us here buy petrol or diesel. So I'm going to explain it relative to that. And the problem that we're trying to fix is that right now, hydrogen is much more expensive to buy than diesel. So at the moment, you just keep buying diesel and keep buying the fossil fuel. But there's a few problems you need to overcome. Well, first of all, even if you could bridge that gap so you can make it that diesel and hydrogen were the same price, you need to give the market enough confidence that it's not just going to be something the government will do for the next, I don't know, year and then change its mind. You need to give a long-term commitment so that the companies are actually going to build the kit to produce hydrogen, and say a trucking company is actually going to commit to buying a hydrogen truck rather than a diesel alternate. So it's got to be a long-term commitment. So bear with me here. This is going to be a bit of a hand-wavy Dean the Economist graph, but it'll be all right. So this is my graph to explain the intervention. So imagine that green line is the price of hydrogen. And it starts out that right now hydrogen is really, really expensive. The technology isn't there, but over time it's just going to trend down and down because the technology improves. Whereas that blue line is the price of diesel. And diesel is something that at the moment is relatively cheap. It's probably the case it's going to trend up over time, just as carbon becomes more and more expensive. But even over that period, it's going to go up and down. You could have, I don't know, peace declared in Ukraine and diesel prices fall, or there could be something else that goes up. And what we want to do is bridge the gap between these two prices. If anyone thinks this is like a really complicated thing that you've never seen in your life, I guarantee that most of you already have this. It's just how a bank fixes a mortgage rate, where a mortgage offers you a fixed mortgage rate so that you can get on and decide to buy a house or not, whereas in the real world, interest rates are going up and down all the time. So imagine we were right on the left-hand side of this graph, and the green line is much higher than the blue line, so hydrogen is much, much above the price of diesel. And the government came along and said, okay, random company X, we will meet the gap between these two. So the difference between the two, we're going to meet it for a year, and you can confidently produce hydrogen. It's probably the case that nothing would happen, because the uncertainty about what would happen next would mean you wouldn't commit to the capital investment. So what we're going to do instead is try and commit for this entire wedge. And what will happen is that effectively we'll ask companies to commit to the green line, and it may be that for any individual company that green line doesn't slope down as much, or maybe they're really confident about the future and they'll commit to a really rapid decline. And then the contract will say, on any given day, you'll get the difference between this and the price of diesel. Now, the good thing about that is, say if we just said, oh, we're just going to give this fixed subsidy of hydrogen, and then it turns out that, say, the Ukraine situation gets much, much worse and diesel prices increase a whole lot. Now you're going to have the government, which is your taxes, are going to be paying more than what is needed to get this market to go. And we don't want to do that as a society. Likewise, if the diesel price fell massively, then all of a sudden it's not profitable to produce hydrogen and the market would stop. But by saying you're going to get this variable subsidy, you can have greater confidence that this market will exist. So while we say, oh, this is probably a $100 million initiative, it's a bit of a forecast. What it actually is saying the government's going to intervene to ensure that a hydrogen market exists, or gives it the best chance of existing. And also, in that magical moment that Tiffany talked about, where the lines cross, and actually it's more cost effective for hydrogen to be used than the fossil fuel alternate, then the intervention would stop. So it's hopefully not going to commit the region to a long-term subsidy to existing. What's going to happen next, though, is the question. So that's the theory of it, is that now the government has committed to making this happen. What my team will be doing next is going out and talking to likely companies that would be involved in this. And because it's a new technology, we have to actually try and make sure that we've got this intervention correct. So through between about now and September, there's going to be effectively like a pre-auction consultation. So we'll try and nut out exactly what is needed. And anyone that wants to be involved in that should contact the Southland Just Transition website. Has our contact details, so you could, you may even want to become an investor and start producing hydrogen, or if you just want to stay involved, just register your email with that. Then probably from early 2024, there will actually be an auction. So once we've designed what the tool's going to be, we'll go to the open market and say, okay, these are the rules. Companies come to us with your ideas. And effectively that's where they commit to that green line. And then they need to go off and hedge their power prices and all these sorts of things. Then once that auction's run, you actually need to land the contract, so there'll be a negotiation that will happen afterwards. And that'll mean that from the start of 2025, you'd expect the subsidy will be available. Now, it may be that it takes a bit longer than that before a plant's actually up and running, but it'll be the case that this is actually a facility that's already there. And there are clearly some options with hydrogen that can be built quite quickly relative to an ammonia plant. Okay. How am I going for time? This is my last slide, so we'll just have to kind of pad from here. So where does that leave us now? We go back to this plan that the Just Transitions group has got, and as I said, it's got some near-term initiatives and then that long-term plan of what happens next. There's quite a few things happening, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my colleagues in the Enduring Oversight group speaking over the next couple of days. But one thing I'd just like to almost put out as a challenge to the room is that what the Minister has announced are all things that will move you along this journey, but it's not sufficient to achieve it. There's a big role for everyone in this room to lean in. And I don't know whether it's about the stuff the Huka Rūnaka are doing and training and what have you. Maybe it's about the Chamber of Commerce really coming up with a way of getting transitions going, or maybe it's about some of the investment attraction, or just about the community leaning in and showing leadership and driving the stuff forward. But I'll kind of put a challenge to the room that this is now the end of the beginning with the Just Transition work, and now things can really get going, and it's an opportunity for you all to participate. So I would encourage them that. Otherwise, great to be here again. Thank you for the hospitality to everyone that the team has worked with over the past couple of years. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Have we got 10 minutes? Don't have to take questions. How much time have we got? 5 to 10 minutes. So is there any questions from the room? Nobby. If you want to ask the question, I'll just repeat it for the online ones, Nobby.
The transition period for the subsidy, 24-25, what happens to people like the Richardson Group who are already doing some hydrogen injection trials into their trucking system, one of the biggest trucking companies in the country with about 1,800 trucks? Are they going to be disadvantaged by being in early? Or can they still apply for the transition funding or the subsidy funding?
Okay, so just for those online or that missed the start of that question, Nobby's question was the local company HWR Richardson has already started on this journey. So they've invested in some trucks, they have hydrogen, and the question was well, I'll paraphrase and say, great initiative, Dean, great work, but it looks like it's not starting till 2025. How would HWR Richardson take advantage of this? The thing is they can put in a tender, or they can be a consumer of this once it's up and running, but the facility won't exist until it exists, so there will be a delay there. Although I can say that the Minister is currently meeting with that company to talk about other options around. Part of budget announcements was another initiative that was directly at trucking, so not a Southland specific initiative, but there are other things there. But the direct answer to your question is the facility starts in 2025 and anyone can participate once that is set up.
Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa, ko Mike Pohi o toko ingoa. Thank you for the presentation. A special thank you to those who have worked to get that Hydrogen Transition Fund established. Great work. and great explanation. The question is, what's the time associated with that intersection of the green and blue lines? And where's the level of comfort that you and perhaps we have that that's going to be the right time, given our 2050 horizon, given the obvious of how long it takes to get a major facility up and going? Where's the level of comfort on that intersection and the timing of it?
Yeah. Tēnā koe, Mike. Nice to see you again. So the question of can you predict the future, Dean? And when will those two lines intersect? So what the facility that was announced in the budget is, it's got a 10-year horizon. That isn't because we know exactly that it will take 10 years. Technology will evolve and the future will be the future. What it is it's I guess, confidence in the industry that they at least know for the next 10 years there's that bridge. And if it was the case that there was still a gap after that 10-year horizon, future governments would need to address that. But right now the commitment is it's 10 years, and beyond that we'll just have to wait and see. Various people from the industry have given me predictions that range from that and perhaps longer.
Kia ora, Dean. Dave Binney here from Te Arapaki Trust. We're in a similar situation to Richardson Group. We've invested a bunch of cash in hydrogen electrolyser, got a production facility north. So my question is the facility open to the whole country, or is it specifically Southland?
So that design isn't quite landed, but it would be, you would be open to bids from outside of Southland. What I'd say is that Southland's more advanced than most parts of the country, so it's probably the case that Southland would come. One of the things that could be is it's for production in Southland for consumption elsewhere. So you still get the production, the hydrogen made here, but it might be, I don't know, hydrogen trucks in Christchurch use it. But at the moment it'll really depend on what the tender reveals.
Well, I'll just launch a pitch, because we're already producing, so to say we're more advanced, I don't think is quite true, really. But I'm happy to talk about that offline with you if you want.
Look forward to it.
Cheers.
Hi, Nicol Horrell, Chairman of Environment Southland. I'm just looking at we're hearing there's a 5-year lead time for this plant. Things don't seem to correlate. Are there things we don't know about? And I guess we don't want to talk fest for the next few days, but it would be great to have a timeline when we're going to get some announcements on what is happening. And we've got some really, really exciting prospects. But until some of those things are sorted out, it's actually probably hard for people to get hold of it and do stuff.
Tēnā koe, Nicol, good to see you. So the question is, so we've heard the previous speaker said it will take 5 years to get a plant established. I've just said that it will be 2.5 years before you get a facility for subsidising hydrogen established. How can we get things moving? I guess the answer to that question would be, from an economic development perspective, is that a plant that is committed to, that is built in 5 years' time, means that activity starts now. And a facility that's available to encourage consumption that kicks in 2.5 years' time equally will support the construction of a factory now. So there is opportunities that come from these things being announced and providing the certainty. But like I said, this isn't the whole solution. There's more that needs to be done. It's really about how the region and other players get behind these sorts of initiatives. It's about the leadership from here that you move these things forward in a hopefully a rapid manner, rather than the alternate. Just mindful of my hosts, I might just take one more question. Sally. Kia ora.
Thank you very much for elucidating how that's working.
Doesn't appear to be. Yep.
Just on the topic of people who can take up these opportunities sooner, there are already first movers, including the Arapaki Trust. There's Haringa. there's Haringa, there's Fabrum, HW Richardson will have their first hydrogen production in Gore later this year. So not on the scale perhaps that's planned for Southland in the longer term, but there are shorter term ones. So just to add to your answer earlier, I think there are smaller players already in the market and have big plans, mostly around the refuelling network side of it. So I think what you're suggesting here will be something that I'll be very interested in talking with you about. Sorry, I hope that's okay to just add.
No, that's excellent. Okay. In that case, in the interest of keeping moving, I'll stop there. But if anyone wants to come and have a chat, I'll be around for a couple of days. And if you see someone with EMI on their badge, just go and ask them as well, and they will be able to help you out. Okay. Thank you, everyone.